You love a drink, you think you drink too much, but you're not sure. What next?
You're listening to another Torched original. Are you feeling stuck when it comes to creating content for you and your business? Would you like a podcast of your very own? Or maybe you'd like to stand out and reach new audiences? Head to gettorched.com, that's GETTORCHT.com today, and we look forward to helping you on your content creation journey. And now, enjoy the show.
Burning question, and I'm not going to start off I'm super excited, but I secretly am, because I do love a drink. A lot of people I know love a drink, and I also am very aware that it can lead into a dark place. So hence the reason I've got my next guest on, Dean Beattie, all the way from Brighton. I had to throw that one in. We had a bit of a venue change today, hence why that was a relevant thing. But Dean has just such an awesome story. I met Dean 22 years ago in a gym, fitness space, and always have respected what you've done, but never understood the story behind the man. So hence why I've brought you in, because there are so many questions that I need to ask you and want to ask you on behalf of everyone else. So if I go to a place that you don't, you just do a big bum bum and we'll move on. But knowing you well enough that I know you're here to share your story. So you do a lot of work in the men's health space, which we will go into on the back end of this. But I really do want people to understand your story and where you've come from, and because it's pretty inspiring. So over to you, Dean. Who the hell are you, and what's your story?
Thanks, Kirsty. It's great to be here and great to speak a little bit about my story with alcoholism, and also a little bit about men's health and what I do now. But just a quick backstory is, and it's 21 years, I think. It was 21 years since I'm originally from Horsham, and I lobbed back in Melbourne in November 2001. I got sober in March of 2001, so I haven't had a drink or a drug now for, it was 21 years. So it's 21 and a half years
Wow.
now. Yeah, which is great. So, look, my story was I grew up in country Victoria. I think you're from Mount Gambier?
Yes.
Originally? Yeah, very similar. Like not a lot going on, Kirsty, is there? Not a lot going on at
You
all.
know what? I do miss that. That you can
I
get
don't.
from one side of town to the other pretty quick.
That is good.
You know, we had to hike to Collingwood today, so.
Yeah, well, when I started, when I grew up in Horsham, like traffic lights were a highlight because there was only 2 sets in the whole town. So it is different being in inner Melbourne. But so I grew up middle class background, probably a little bit less than middle class. My mother was a nurse. My father had a business, worked very hard. Nothing of note growing up. I mean, I can talk about, I've made peace with what happened with my parents. My father did the best he could, but and we might get into that with the men's health, but he didn't probably have the tools to be a father. He's not alone with that in the post-war generation.
Totally, yeah.
So that's a big part of what I do with men. But, probably the story gets interesting for what we're speaking about today is when I went to school and I had all that teenage angst about how I looked and where I fitted in, etc. And then I had a drink, and I had a drink at 14. I think it was my grandfather's 60th, and it just changed everything for me. I loved it. So we'll talk a little bit about today. We've already had a pre-conversation around the distinction between an alcoholic and someone who just likes a drink and someone who might drink a little bit too much. But for me, the classic example was I just couldn't get enough even from the first drink. I had a drink and it just took me away to a different place. All that stuff I had fell away. Some people drink for social anxiety. Some people drink to fit in or a little bit of relief. But for me, it was even beyond that. It was just like, this is the panacea of life. This is the elixir. This is a spiritual experience, And I talked to people. I met a girl. I did all these things I couldn't do, threw up and passed out. And really you could press paste and repeat for the next 14 years with that and throw some drugs in, etc. So
when you say, sorry to interrupt, but when you say from 14 you had that drink, like it took you to a different place. Because sometimes I can have a drink and I go, oh, yeah, I'm not really, that tastes, I'm not feeling that right now.
Yeah.
So then I move on or I stop or did that ever happen, or it was just from that moment you knew that was something that you loved? And
and I think the easiest way is to get straight into the classification for an alcoholic or an addict. I work in the space, so I've worked in the rehab space for 10 or 12 years. I do all their wellbeing and yoga and run workshops, etc. But really the hallmark of an alcoholic is once you start, you can't stop. You know, once you pick up a drink, it's really difficult to stop. So even from an early age, I had no problem with my friends, with my peer group would go out and drink, and I would always be the one that would get more pissed, you know, and black out. But the next day, you know, I remember going on a camping trip at an early age and drinking the next day and loving it. And the other guys wouldn't even be thinking about having a drink till later on. And, because it got me back to that space. That got me back to that removed from reality, which was what I craved.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you mentioned that you work a lot in the rehab space. So is that a common with everyone that's sort of in that space? That it you know, because I look and I go, okay, well, is an alcoholic classed as how many drinks you have?
Yeah.
Is it that you're a bad drunk and you black out and you can't remember anything?
Yeah.
Is it that you're back on it the next day? Like how do you...
The difficulty with addiction, and so let's put it out there that addiction, so when we talk about the big three mental health issues in Australia, it's anxiety, depression and substance abuse. So it is classified as a disease. Addiction's been classified as a disease for years by the World Health Organisation.
Yes.
But there is no blood test. It's not like you can go in and do a test for diabetes. It's something that really has to be self-diagnosed. But the real crux for me is if you can't put a substance down, or you're using it to mask what's happening in your life, or it's causing you additional problems, then maybe it's something you have to look at. And then not everyone will go down the 12-step program. So I'm involved in a 12-step group. I've been going for 21 years. I have a men's group that I'm active in. I have a sponsor who took me through the 12-step program, and I take others through it, and it's been a life-changing experience.
Still
for me.
to this day.
Yes, very much to this day.
Wow.
That's what I know people struggle to say. But it's not about drink anymore. I don't sit around thinking, I want to have a drink. I need to go to a meeting and have a drink. It's my, I'm not going to use the term church, but it is, I've had, I believe, a spiritual awakening, which we can touch on. But and this keeps me connected. So by helping others to go through the process like I was helped, it keeps me sane, healthy and happy, and stops me from ever having a drink. Because make no mistake, I know people who have relapsed and died. Like addiction... We'll have a lot of fun today and I can talk about it. And I have a really good life and a lot of laughs, but it's a serious illness. And I've been to funerals of people that I'd love to say that they're 60. I've been to devastating funerals of guys at 20, 25, 35, guys that have killed themselves, guys that have died of misadventure. There's a real tragic element to addiction, and that's why we're passionate about trying to get people to investigate it. But the upshot is if you can't control the amount that you take once you start, then you might have a problem with addiction.
There's no off button. We always laugh.
No
Say,
off button.
Mate, your off button's broken.
Exactly.
But it's literally non-existent.
And I can look. There's little things as well. Does your personality change? Do you get a bit? Do you get a bit narky? Do you get a bit too aggressive? Little things like that are warning signs. And then, you know, something that you could take to a medical professional. There's the meetings that I speak about are always open to look at as well, to identify. There's many great resources out there, but it really, you know, it's about 1 in 8, 1 in 9 people have the addictive gene. So when we look at brain chemistry, there's a lot more research being done. I actually listened to a Huberman podcast around alcohol and alcoholism yesterday, and it was great. But there's not a lot of money devoted to that because there's not a lot of money.
I was going to say I haven't heard a hell of a lot about that. No. Every other disease.
If it was fat loss, it would be all over it. You know? But yeah, so it's really a self-diagnosed thing. But like, if you're an alcoholic and you're drinking like I was, you know there's something fundamentally wrong. I knew from 14 that there was something wrong, and it just got worse and worse and worse.
Yeah,
like my drinking, and I could tell you some stories that, you know, probably people here aren't alcoholics. I would be drinking. The end stage of my alcoholism in around 98 to 99 on the Gold Coast. Great place to have a breakdown or a bender for anyone. I was living on Chevron Island on the Gold Coast. Keep that in mind. But I would be drinking round the clock. I wouldn't know. We call it in recovery the alcoholic dawn. I wouldn't know. I woke up sometimes and didn't know whether it was morning or night. It was dark.
Goodness.
Yeah, and this is what happens. And then you make this firm resolution not to drink again. I remember ringing my mum and crying and putting her through hell, like her son's up there and desperately lonely, desperately unhappy.
And how old were you at this
28,
point?
27. So between 24 to 28. So, you know, I discovered, look, I'll give you the complete background. I came down from Horsham to go to uni, got into fitness and training, and that's, you know, something that we have in common. I was obsessive with that. It was going to change the way that I felt about myself.
Is that a personality trait as well?
Yeah,
that A-type personality. It's like
addictive.
All in, 100%, all or nothing.
And I look back at some of the people that we worked with, because we knew each other from a gym that probably should remain unnamed, but it was a really big gym, lots of trainers. And look, when I competed in natural bodybuilding 2007, and there's that around the gym scene, on the surface ostensibly very healthy, but you scratch the surface and it's the most addictive. Like where everyone was
Hence
taking
why I've got
drugs.
my own place now.
Yeah, exactly. So, look, yeah, I mean, I was addictive by nature. I still enjoy training today, and everyone has a bit of vanity, but I'm not as obsessed about that it's going to change me, the perception, and but, I went to university, I discovered marijuana, and I was an everyday dope smoker for probably 5 years, from 92 to about, till I got sober. Discovered ecstasy in 95, and I thought that was the life-changing experience. Like, that was just a whole new world. And so I was excessive with all of those cocaine, steroids, you name it, I've taken it. And I'm open about that.
So is it easy to get?
Everything's easy to get if you're
So should we legalise drugs?
If you ask me as an addict, I think yes, if the money was poured back into recovery and stuff. I mean, really, we're just subsidising drug dealers at the moment, and we're propping up, money launderers and
But wouldn't that make
cash
it easier for people?
Not really. When you look at studies done overseas,
They get it anyway.
When they've legalised heroin in places like Edinburgh, they've done studies. Switzerland, Canada's always been a prominent one. It's worked because it reduces the stigma of people trying to do it. It's not this sort of underground thing.
Yeah.
And it just gives you the ability to treat and do it. Look, the war on drugs, there's some great books, and I've read them around it. Like Joanne Hari does some great stuff. Dr. Gabor Mate is an expert in the field, but it hasn't worked. Like the war on drugs.
Well, something we're doing's not working because it seems like everyone's doing it, but it's illegal. It's kind of bizarre.
And I'll be honest with you now. I'm an alcoholic. Alcohol's illegal. Alcohol, when you look at its chemical form, is just another drug. It's just a legal drug.
Yeah, don't they say weight for weight? It's massive. 30 times more potent than heroin and stuff. But
look,
that.
The lawmakers have always. I don't want to get political, but look, I'm not one here to say don't drink, because I'm a person that don't drink. If you can drink and have a few drinks, hats off to you. People can have a few lines and have a joint and certainly drink, fantastic. But there's a certain percentage of the population that are like me. And when we propagate binge drinking like we do around the Melbourne Cup, that's when it gets to me. Like when we sort of glamorise blackouts, which is really an overdose of alcohol. That's when I think, I'm not really comfortable about that, because it shows kids, it's a bit like the gambling, like we say, oh, this is socially acceptable. But how do you know that your child's not that 1 in 8 like me that can't drink?
It's pretty high numbers, 1 in 8.
1 in 10 is probably the conservative
but
figure.
Still, that's quite high.
It is. So, and it's, and look, to finish my story is that it just got darker and darker and darker. So by the age of 28, I was living on the Gold Coast. I'd broken up with a great girlfriend. I was withdrawn from my family. I was really lonely. I was doing some stuff that I never thought that I would do. I was drinking around the clock. I was broke. It was just, that's your rock bottom that we talk about in recovery.
Yeah.
Found myself in a meeting and didn't get it for a year, and then finally put it down in 2001. And my life has been on an upward scale since then, because it was a real low point.
You were able to go into the program and go cold turkey, not touch, or did you fall off the wagon, as I say?
Yeah, I had a couple of busts or slips. I always think slips sounds a little bit too mild for us, because it is a bust. It is a big thing for us.
I haven't heard that before, bust.
Bust. So I would have 60 days up, and I would have a little bust. I'd have one last one in Horsham after using marijuana, after using ecstasy, thinking I could swap one for the other, but it doesn't work. So for us in recovery, it's total abstinence. Anything that affects us from the neck up, we say, which is like any stimulant or anything. Yep. So, often people in recovery are really careful about pain medication, using it as prescribed, etc. But so I've been clean from all that stuff. Coffee is still something I gave up smoking 2 or 3 years after I was still smoking.
So you don't have coffee?
I do have coffee.
Oh, you do have coffee.
But but even that I have to be a little bit careful of, because of the stimulant aspect of it. I can feel when I've had too much, I'm a bit jittery. But so it's total abstinence for us. But again, this isn't for everyone. I tried to drink, like that year that I was in and out, I tried to drink normally and responsibly, but it just got worse and worse. So I proved to myself that I'm an alcoholic of the variety that we speak about in recovery. So,
right. So you hit rock bottom.
Yep.
What did you do next? Like what, if anyone that's listening does feel like that, and they do feel like they're at rock bottom, I wouldn't even know.
Yeah.
Like, where the hell do you go? Google it, I suppose.
The short answer to that is a shitload of meetings. So look, I'm in, the only reason I'm not, it's an anonymous organisation, which that should give it away, and it's about alcoholics, so that should totally give it away. So but we have a respect that we don't talk about. The level of anonymity is at press, radio, and films. So even on a podcast or Facebook, we kind of, I respect that. But I did I've done thousands of those meetings in the first year. In Horsham, there wasn't enough meetings. That prompted me to move to Melbourne. I was that serious. My recovery was first, and I started at the gym. And that's when my recovery took off, is because there was access to more meetings, more people of my age getting sober.
Yep.
Look, we should have thousands of people in recovery, but people, the disease of addiction and alcoholism isn't recognised as much as it is. And it's funny, it's good to be on this today because we've got so much better with mental health. We talk about anxiety and depression, but we still kind of look at it, that's a bit weakness, he's drinking too much or she's drinking too much.
Well, it is looked at like that. Yeah. And I think this is what prompted the interest in your stories, because, we sit around and we kind of laugh, and you always laugh at, my husband, who's also Dean, must be a Dean thing. Yeah. And we always laugh, go, his off button's broken, or, I don't have an off button. I mean, he's totally fine, don't get me wrong, but, you sit around and laugh, but I think maybe there is that little undercurrent of, well, maybe I do have a problem, or maybe, so I'm thinking here, I'm going to go home and reward myself with a drink tonight. Yep, cheers to me. I've survived another, it's my episode number 11, I've got another one down. But I guess the other side to that is I can stop, but I guess what you're saying is, if you've got an issue, you can't stop. But getting back to your rock bottom, so this is what I find interesting is, how do you know you're at rock bottom? Like, did you have friends saying to you, mate, you're a dickhead, you need help? Did you have any of that, or was it just that you really were that?
Yeah. The best way I can describe it is that I kind of knew, I think we all know, and this could be that spiritual level as well, I knew on a deep level, if I continued, that death was a real option, or insanity. And we talk about jails, insanity, or death if you continue to drink and you're an alcoholic or an addict. And I knew at that stage that something really potently bad was going to happen. And friends, yes, family. I'd ostracised a lot of people at that stage. That was part of my addiction. And I just knew, and I can't tell you, look, and I keep coming back, it is a spiritual program, and people think it's not religious, it's not a God, it's like, spirituality is just about, maybe I don't have all the answers and there's another way. And I think I was guided into my first meeting, and then I rejected it, and then I kept going back. But the people were so beautiful and helpful to me and my family, and this is what I try to do because it was given to me, that I kept coming back and I kept listening. And that's why we often say to people, come for 90 days, do 90 meetings in 90 days and identify, because you can go to your first meeting and go, I didn't like that guy, I didn't like this.
Yeah. And so is it more about that community and sense of belonging? Because I picked up when you mentioned, your dad did the best, and, he's probably of the age like my dad after my mum died, did his best. Was it perfect? No, but love him and wouldn't change a thing because it's made me the person I am today. But, it's... is it more that you found a belonging and someone that could hold you up and work on yourself or do the work? I mean, I found Reiki when I came to Melbourne with some gym owners that we knew, and that was my way to heal. I
think it's massive. And part of what I do now is I've done some postgrad in positive psychology, and part of the science of wellbeing and optimal health is a support network. But put the science aside, it was a massively supporting community. I was an isolated drinker. Like, my end-stage alcoholism for most of us isn't going to a bar and having a great time. It's at home because you're not sure when you're going to black out, what's going to happen. It's a horrible, lonely, dangerous, how can I put it? It's just a dark place. And then you come in and you have running buddies. I'm still great friends with these guys today that I got sober with, because your friendship is based on something incredibly deep,
Yes.
And then you have those ahead of you. You have your sponsor, those that have stayed sober and been through the path, and it's just a great lifestyle. But it's not all cups of tea and Jesus. Like, we have a great time. Like, I have a lot of mates, and we would go to nightclubs.
Cups of tea and Jesus.
Never heard that one?
I've not heard that one.
Well, that's
gold.
So we have a look. It wasn't like, I've always been a bit of a smart ass. I like banter. I like going out. I like having a good time. And I just took a year or two. It was really like intensive care for that first year to prevent a relapse. But then I started to expand, and all those things I thought I couldn't do, camping trips, going to grand finals, going to the football, going away, concerts, etc. I love it. I love it today.
So you removed yourself initially and then integrated back in.
Yeah, and it's hard. Look, and no one will, look, I sponsor guys and I work in the rehabs. The first year is hard. It's like recovery for many. It's a disease. It's a disease. It's like if you're recovering from cancer surgery, you wouldn't be dancing around, do you know what I mean, for the first 12 months. Like you have to treat the illness with the respect that it deserves, and then your recovery comes after that. So I was, it was.
So I met you when you were in that phase. So I wouldn't have even known any different.
I was 6 months. I barely remember the first few years of recovery. We have a saying, it takes a few years for the fog to clear, because you've really put your mind and your body and your spirit through a grueling time, and then I finally cleared my head, and I was working in a gym, and and I met some great people. But there was times there that people that you and I knew would go out, and they wouldn't invite me because they knew I was sober, and that was really hard for me. You know what I mean? And then I introduced one of my good friends to another friend in the gym, and then they started going out and partying, and they didn't do it maliciously, but they couldn't invite me because, and I felt, you feel left out, but that, if you stick around and meet like-minded souls, you get through that part. You know?
Do, yes.
And we're so ingrained that you have to drink to have a good time, which is like, I'll tell you, this bullshit. Like I've had so much good times and dancing and ecstatic dance and all these different things, but you have to get through this period at the start. So there's a lot of support. It's not the end of the world if alcohol's not for you.
Yeah. Now you do a lot of work now, obviously in the rehab space, which makes sense, and you're giving back, which is gorgeous. What is it that you do with the men's health space? Because there's another. Yeah,
it's a whole different realm. I mean, I finished off my sociology degree while I was working at the gym that we were at. I went back. It took me 12 years to do a 3-year degree, Kirsty. That happens when you're in active
I didn't know you're allowed to do take that.
No, you are. Well, it dropped out and got special consideration, everything that you do.
Yeah.
But so I have a passion for reading about men's issues and men's health, and the work I do with men today is very similar. I suppose I'm trying to bring what I learnt in recovery into the general population. So I do an 8-week program called a Men's Reboot, but yes, we go into the gym. Yes, we do strength training. I'm a yoga teacher, so we do a lot of that stuff. Mindfulness, meditation, sleep, but a lot of stuff around positive psychology. So some of those models as well. And a lot of men that have had the experience, like it's an interesting time for men at the moment.
I wouldn't like to be a man at the moment.
Disenfranchised. Yeah, well, it's,
I've got mum of 2 boys. I fear for them.
And some would say you've had 5,000 years of patriarchy. You've probably earned a little bit of a tough time, but it's we're a bit lost. We don't know where we sit. We don't know. We're trying to find our way. And there's a lot of, like, Australia's been a little bit backward. To be honest, virtue of tyranny of distance and 200 years, but our toxic masculinity, the misogyny, the racism, etc., and it's not just men, but we've propagated that for years. And I live in the inner city, and there's a lot of guys doing yoga and a lot of guys doing self-development, but you go a little bit further out and some of those attitudes are pretty entrenched. There's a lot of angry men, and it's been illuminating for me. The last year I have a couple of friends that I didn't realise till a few years ago, and that's when I probably strayed into this work about, I'm never fearful going on a train or walking back to the car on my own, but women are. Do you know what I mean? And after those conversations, every time there was a death of a young woman or a death or a violent death, 9.5 times they're men. Do you know what I mean? Propagating it. But also the suicide rate of men is nearly twice that of women.
It is.
We're lost. We really are a bit angry. We're lost. Well, not a bit. The other one that really got me is the lady in Queensland with the 3 kids and petrol.
Oh my God.
And I just read the coroner stuff around that. So how a man can get to that point that he takes it out like that is diabolical.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what causes that? Look, there's and I'm not absolving those people. That's a horrific act.
Yes.
But is there something that we can do? Something that we can change? So I did some stuff with the Jesuits who do a more program modelling equality and respect. And it's just looking at those things with men today. And but what the literature and what everything's finding out, they need connection. I'm blessed that I'm in a men's group.
I 100% agree with that, because connection then allows conversation.
Yeah.
So if you're connected, you have people you trust and you can talk about stuff. And I said this on a podcast, one of the episodes earlier, as soon as you offload a problem, the problem's halved.
Exactly.
You know, it's not as big a deal once you can talk about it. But if you keep it internalized, you're only hearing your version. There's no other way that you need to be able to see it like a helicopter view almost.
And that's exactly, and it's not anecdotal that women are better at sharing their feelings and divesting themselves of that stuff. They are so much better than men. I'm in the yoga world. I'll go to a yoga retreat, which are beautiful things, great way, and there'll be 19 women and 2 guys. You know, it's good when you're single, but it doesn't it doesn't help men. But look, it's exactly that. Look, I met a man. I've probably got 30 men, good men role models that I could call now and say, listen, I'm thinking this.
Wow, that's incredible, because most people have one or two or none.
And I could, instead of the advice that I might get, my girlfriend's doing this, they won't say, go and have a drink, mate, it's all right, or she's wrong. They'll say, well, what's your part in it? What you need to look at this, you're doing this wrong, and call me out on things, which is really important. And like you say, men sit at home at the moment on the internet, go through, get into some sort of whatever, area of politics or extremism, and they just go further down the spiral, and then you see some horrific end results of that. And I think the last 5 years we've seen that, the rise of the shooter. And again, I hate to say it, but I haven't read about many women that are doing that in the States or going,
never thought of it like that.
No,
true.
So it's this disenfranchised, usually white, I hate to say it, young man, and I also hate to say that we like to put it on different ethnicities and religions, but a lot of these people are right-wing Christian as well. And so but that's getting by the by. The problem is where's this disconnect started? And there's a lot of historical elements in there as well. And
and having conversation like this to or groups or...
Yeah. Getting the message out there. And Are You OK Day's great. All these initiatives are great, but I think we're in the infancy of it. I think women have done this naturally.
I was a long way to go, I would imagine, for men particularly. And, I am working super hard with my boys on talking about their feelings. Yeah. My son is part of a Jesuit school, which was interesting that you brought that up. And he'd been sick the other day and, he had something at school. And I said, well, what's this retreat for? You go away and talk about your feelings. Yeah. I said, you're going.
Yeah. How old is he?
He's 15.
And this brings me, and I just sort of prompted me that the rites of passage stuff around young men, and I know that we used to work with a lot of Jewish clientele where we were, and the bar mitzvah and the symbolic things they have in that culture and other cultures are so good. Like turning what's your definition or delineation from boyhood to manhood, and like Dr. Arnie Rubenstein, there's Steve Bidoff have done so much great work in this space. But for me, I'll be honest with you, in the country, there's none of that. So it's get pissed, fumble around with a girl, maybe lose your virginity. And that's supposed to be your coming of age as a man. And it's so removed from what it should be. In tribal societies, etc. And so there's lots of great stuff happening through schools that do that now.
Seriously, that's what I say to the boys. So you don't understand. Like, they are so open and honest with their feelings. I mean, I do push it a little bit because I'm onto that. But the more that, and that's where just listening to the conversation in the schools that it is, and I think this was one of the questions I saw on a round table thing once is, should it be put on the schools or should it be put on the parents to have these conversations with the kids? And for me, it's a combination of everything, but it does start, as you and I know, it starts from your childhood, because your experiences shape your belief system. So if you're having experiences like you must do this or you must go and have a drink or whatever, then chances are that's what the child's going to learn. So
exactly. And and the other part to that is this, without getting into the historical thing, we have such a cultural emphasis on. I remember my parents in the early days, my dad, it's all about what you're going to do for work, what are you going to do for money. There's never a talk about how you're going to bring up your family, how you're going to engage in relationships, how you're going to get on with other people. So this obsession in the West and our capitalist culture since the Industrial Revolution has been part of this issue. We took men away from raising the children, like they're not raised through the village anymore. We're very individualistic in the West. My family was certainly like that, didn't mix it up. So there's issues there that have fundamentally caused some of these distress and issues with men. So essentially I'm just trying to, use the lessons that I've learned and been blessed to have experienced with men that perhaps haven't had the opportunity through. So I've been to rock bottom, to get these experiences, and hopefully not everyone has to.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Just going back to the kids and the alcohol, what are your thoughts? Because it's a burning question through parents with kids my age, obviously, 15, sometimes it's younger, 16, 17. Obviously you read literature and says do not let your kids drink. The earlier they drink, the more brain damage they do and the chances of being addicted, having an addiction. But is it that you teach your children, my thoughts are you teach your children that having a drink is only for a social occasion, you don't have to, but it's as opposed to going to a park and drinking behind the tree with your mates because, this is the dilemma, right? Because they're probably going to go and do it whether you do it or not. So do you allow it to happen, one, so they can feel it? Or like there's this whole it's this moral dilemma of, well, shit, I don't know. Like my instincts to say do not touch a drink ever.
Yeah.
But that's not reality.
Yeah.
So it's I don't know, I just thought your thoughts on.
And this is a really good question, Kirsty. This has come up because people that I've known, like either PT clients or friends that have asked me through the journey about with their kids, and I can only answer it from the aspect is that I think absolutely they're going to have a drink, encourage them to do it responsibly, and just hopefully you can have a relationship with this. If it goes too far, they can come and talk to you about it. Because what I'll keep driving home is that I don't know that your child might not have the disease.
Correct.
This is a legitimate.
We don't know either. Yeah.
So probably the big message I'd like to get out from this is that the disease of addiction is real, and it's not a moral weakness, or it's not someone going.
It's not their fault.
It's not their fault. It's not their fault, and maybe they're
but the signs is what we need to be aware of.
Well, I was necking a bottle of gin on my own in my bedroom at 14, so that was probably a sign.
Shit.
And my mum was on a nursing, training course. So, that sort of stuff. But I was probably that extreme end. I feel like my alcoholism was pretty much diagnosable if I look back at that. But, maybe they're that 1 in 8. Like there was probably 7 or 8 of us going out, and I was the one that was. These guys would be about the night out or where we're going. I was all about the alcohol. I was obsessed with what it was going to do. I just cared about the drinking. So that can come up. But unfortunately, that might not come up with the parents. It might cut up with the friends. But it's just a sign to look out for if there's that obsessional nature. And I remember asking my therapist, and everyone should have a good therapist, about the branch that alcoholism or addiction is. And it's that OCD. It's that obsessive. And I relate to that. I've been like that with my training. I've been like that with sex, relationships. This disease can come out in different ways as well. Yeah. But certainly around drinking and drugs, it's shining.
So there is warning signs there, and I guess if your child displays some of those already, the chances are they might,
Yeah.
And I think it all comes back again to relationships.
Yeah. With
your children, or or with people, and being able to have a conversation because then you can pick up on did they black out, were they the one vomiting, and connecting with their mates as well, I suppose, friends. Wow, it's a huge topic. Anything else, nuggets that you can share?
Nuggets.
Apart from what you've already shared?
Well, I think, and look, part of my journey was getting into when I speak about the spirituality, it was, I went down the yoga path as well, and just understanding that, my exercise, I did it obsessively, but now it's a nice way, when you look at the science behind exercise and the neuroscience, it's a great way to quieten the mind naturally. So, using exercise, which I know you're an advocate of, clearly, yoga, mindfulness, meditation, they're great tools that are science-based. All the stuff in positive psych is science-based. And I found when I studied it, a lot of the stuff that I'd learned in 12-step recovery and a lot of stuff I'd learned in yoga, the science validates that. So they're paths that I'd love more men to get into, but more people as general, And we spoke about prior to this is that we, when I started, it was all about the body and the physical. And when we started in that industry, and I'd like to think it's more holistic, but I still train. I teach a class at a gym that I used to be the fitness director of, and it shall remain unnamed. And and I still see it's still very much about. There's a lot of testosterone. There's a lot of aggression within the gym floor. There's a lot of, there's a lot of this getting lost in this body culture still. It's all about how we look, and hopefully I know that you do it with Studio 46 around the holistic approach, and it's about wellness.
I feel like there's a shift.
Yeah.
I mean, you're always going to have that
Yeah.
small percentage
Yeah.
that aren't, but I do feel like, especially after the pandemic, there is a bit of
Yeah,
a shift. And
it's true.
even doing this podcast, I'm 10 episodes in now, so very infant, but pretty much every topic we talk about, the common thread is connection, communication, and exercise, movement.
Yeah.
It's really, that is wellness. That is work life, healthy body, mind, spirit, all of that comes into play.
Yeah.
So
it's a nice way to put it, like all those elements. And that's what total wellness is now. And that's
I like total wellness.
Yeah.
It's like a whole thing.
Yeah.
Loving the work that you're doing, obviously, in that space. And I love the fact that it's come from a place where you were at rock bottom, you needed to be held up, and you own it, and now you're giving back and doing some awesome work in that space. So thank you for coming on and sharing. I feel like I've known you for 22 years, but I actually didn't know you. And you've shared and shed some light on a few things. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Kirsty. It's been great.
Pleasure. Thank you for joining us on this episode of What Next? I'm Kirsty Robbie, and if this episode sparked any questions and you want to know more, please hit us up on our socials at whatnext_with KR, and have a great day.
You're listening to another Torched Original. Are you feeling stuck when it comes to creating content for you and your business? Would you like a podcast of your very own? Or maybe you'd like to stand out and reach new audiences? Head to gettorched.com. That's GETTORCHT.com today, and we look forward to helping you on your content creation journey.